we need to be directing our efforts at stopping that from happening, stopping isolated communities from festering jihadism. Just like when law enforcement is going after gang activity, you work with the community where gangs are located to prevent those acts of violence. In this case, we're not talking about criminal activity, we're talking about acts of war.
We began the show tonight talking about issues arising from the Brussels attack that we have driven into the literal and figurative ground that mealy-mouthed politicians and political wannabes use as talking points that are bandied about as things we must do and then watch as they fade into dust of the 24/7 news cycle. Let's not surrender, though, to what truly needs answering. This time the issue of Muslims, those living in America, the places they live, and what some might call snitching. Others would call their duty as Americans. It's always a pleasure to welcome back President of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And we've talked about this before, but let's be very blunt in the things we discussed today. Ted Cruz talking about patrolling Muslim neighborhoods. Is it not fair to say that what we have learned from overseas and different places around the world is that many times a lot of the terrorist activities do happen in these neighborhoods? And just like he said, going after gangs, maybe it's not a bad idea to be there and put a focus there. Yes?
Absolutely, and we have to put this in the right context. I mean, we have taken so many steps back. The NYPD did great work on counterterrorism, and their seminal report on homegrown terror was basically stripped and removed from their website because of political correctness. Their monitoring program was shut down because of AP reporting, which was nonsense. And at the end of the day, Brussels, what does it teach us? It teaches us that you had a terrorist who had a cell that enacted the Paris operations in November 13, and then that same cell acted again now, which is almost unprecedented, because he was being holed up and shielded by the Molenbeek Muslim community, who absolutely knew where he was, only a few doors down from where he grew up and where his family was. So there's no doubt that he was being shielded, and we have to have better police work. Now, what do we mean by monitoring? That's the key to what Senator Cruz is talking about. Monitoring means on the cops on the beat, on the streets, knowing who lives where, knowing the communities. It's not about violating their civil rights. Good cops know the community. So that's all we're talking about. I think Muslims should be transparent. We should have nothing to hide, to encourage police to have good relationships with us and our neighborhoods. And we should encourage, even call it profiling. There's nothing that violates our civil rights by them knowing our communities.
I'm going to stop right there because you have hit the next point in something that I have talked about many times with people on both sides of the issue here when it comes to the Muslim community living in their neighborhoods. Look, I used the word snitching a couple of moments ago, and that has become popular in the last decade or so for people of communities who turn in people of crime, people who are committing crimes in their own communities. Is it not a responsibility of everybody? Let's not just make it about Muslims here, Zuhdi. It's everybody. It's, again, the old see something, say something, but let's be honest again. We've said this. This is cliche-ish, and we are still not seeing the Muslim community stand up and say, that person, this person. What are they afraid of, Zuhdi? Are they afraid of being killed themselves? Is it just the fact they don't want to be real Americans? What's the reality?
The reality is they're not really looking at security. They're looking at using our community as a racial identity, even though Islam is an idea. They use it as an identity to polarize us, to make us into one block or an Islamist way, that somehow being Muslim is a political identity, which is about political Islam, and creating blasphemy laws where you can't critique an idea.
But Zuhdi, not everybody feels that way, yes? I mean, no. Are we kidding ourselves? 100% of them feel exactly that way?
Absolutely not. I think the majority of Muslims turn in individuals they feel critical about, that they're concerned about. I mean, listen, we are the primary targets. Moderate and non-terrorist radicalist Muslims are the ones that these radicals will target first. And I think many cells have been broken up by Muslims who are patriotic and do turn them in. The problem is our leadership that want to use issues in order to...
Whose leadership, Zuhdi? The Muslim leadership or American government leadership?
Both, but Muslim leadership especially, the Islamists at CARE, the Islamists at the Islamic Society of North America, Muslim Public Affairs Council, they want to strip government of its power to investigate Islamist groups, are the pool in which these radicals swim in, and thus the rest of us who really want to help. And by the way, those groups are the same one that turn to the FBI and Homeland Security when you see hate crimes and other things committed against our community. So it's almost like they want both sides. And I've testified to Congress on this dilemma that the hypocrisy that they show. And I'm told, oh, I'm an Uncle Tom and all these other pejoratives they use. And all we're saying is we're not giving up any civil rights. We want them, though, to be consistent and embrace police and not to, basically say if they knock on your door, call an attorney first, rather than helping them in their investigation.
Okay, then let's do this. 60 seconds left here. How do we then cut through all of the bovine excrement in all of this and get right down to the point of having Muslims in their own communities help instead of hinder?
We basically admit that we have a problem. We admit that while not all Muslims are Islamist ideologically, all Islamists are Muslim. And yes, we don't want the first screening to be about being Muslims, but once they're following leads of radical Muslim students or others, they should embrace the fact that they're going to come into our mosques, come into our delis and business communities, and not say, oh, this is profiling and become a shield, but rather embrace keeping America safe and being part of the solution. And there should be transparency about that and enough with the political correctness.
Embrace being an American. Let's start from there. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, now it's your turn. What happened in Brussels leads us to a choice. It's your choice. Right now, we're going to ask you to take a hard line and fear no question whatsoever. We have a simple poll for you. In order to prevent a Brussels-style attack in America, what would you be willing to allow? More intrusive searches at transportation centers? Greater drone and police surveillance? Expanded law enforcement powers of detention? Immediate cessation issuing any H-1B visas? Or all of the above? You got to choose one, and you got to get to us on this one. This is your chance to be heard with some very hard and difficult choices many people do not want to make. You tell us. Stay with us. The Hardline continues.